I got curious recently. Who is the biggest loser in each Netherrealm story mode? Who loses the most fights, playable or cutscene? Who has the worst ratio of wins and losses? Let's find out. We'll approach this by going character by character in the character select order to make it easier to track. We'll also only be tracking characters that can be fought as or against in gameplay, so no DCU Quan Chi or MKX Li Mei for example. I also won't be counting one-hit KOs and sucker punches because they're not really fights. So let's kick off this series with the first of this style of story mode, Mortal Kombat vs DC Universe. Bro, MK vs DCU isn't a Netherrealm game. So anyway, first we track each character's fights across the story and tally the results. Scorpion loses to Liu Kang, loses to Batman, loses to Sub-Zero, defeats the Joker, defeats Wonder Woman, defeats Superman, defeats Katana, loses to Captain Marvel, loses to Lex Luthor, and loses in the final battle. That's 4-6. Sub-Zero loses to Liu Kang, defeats Superman off screen, loses to Wonder Woman, defeats Raiden, defeats Deathstroke, defeats Batman, defeats Scorpion, loses to Lex Luthor, and loses to Batman in the final battle. We know this because Bruce is still active after this point. That's 5-4. Sonya Blade defeats Catwoman, defeats Baraka, defeats Captain Marvel, defeats Green Lantern, loses to Jax, loses to Green Lantern, loses to the Joker, and loses in the final battle. That's 4-4. Shang Tsung loses to Liu Kang, loses to Wonder Woman, loses to Captain Marvel, defeats Superman, defeats Liu Kang, defeats Green Lantern, defeats Kano, defeats Captain Marvel in the final battle, and loses to Raiden. That's 5-4. Katana potentially loses to Dark Khan off screen to be infected with the Combat Rage, loses to Wonder Woman, loses to Scorpion, and loses in the final battle. That's 0-3 or 0-4. The Joker loses to Batman, loses to Scorpion, defeats Sonya Blade, defeats Kano, defeats Deathstroke, defeats Batman, and loses in the final battle. That's 4-3. Catwoman loses to the Flash, loses to Sonya, loses to the Flash off screen, and loses in the final battle. That's 0-4. The Flash defeats Deathstroke, defeats Catwoman, defeats Kano, defeats Batman, loses to Liu Kang, defeats Catwoman off screen, loses to Lex Luthor, and loses in the final battle. That's 5-3. Superman loses to Sub-Zero off screen, loses to Scorpion, loses to Shang Tsung, defeats Lex Luthor, defeats Batman, ties with Raiden, and defeats Dark Khan. That's 3-3. Batman loses to the Flash, defeats Scorpion, defeats the Joker, defeats Liu Kang, defeats Raiden, loses to Sub-Zero, loses to the Joker, defeats Sub-Zero in the final battle, and loses to Superman. That's 5-4. Jax defeats Sonya, defeats Lex Luthor, defeats Captain Marvel, defeats Wonder Woman, loses to Green Lantern, loses to Lex Luthor, and loses to Lex Luthor in the final battle. That's 4-3. Liu Kang defeats Sub-Zero, defeats Scorpion, defeats the Flash, defeats Shang Tsung, loses to Batman, loses to Shang Tsung, defeats Green Lantern in the final battle, and loses to Raiden. That's 5-3. Raiden loses to Batman, loses to Sub-Zero, loses to Captain Marvel, defeats Shang Tsung, defeats Liu Kang, ties with Superman, and defeats Dark Khan. That's 3-3. Kano loses to the Flash, loses to the Joker, loses to Shang Tsung, and loses in the final battle. That's 0-4. Baraka loses to Sonya, loses to Captain Marvel, and loses in the final battle. That's 0-3. Wonder Woman defeats Shang Tsung, defeats Katana, defeats Sub-Zero, defeats Captain Marvel, loses to Jax, loses to Scorpion, and loses in the final battle. That's 4-3. Deathstroke loses to the Flash, loses to Sub-Zero, loses to the Joker, and loses in the final battle. That's 0-4. Lex Luthor loses to Jax, loses to Green Lantern, defeats Sub-Zero, defeats Scorpion, defeats Jax, defeats the Flash, defeats Jax in the final battle, and loses to Superman. That's 5-3. Captain Marvel loses to Sonya, loses to Jax, loses to Wonder Woman, defeats Raiden, defeats Scorpion, defeats Baraka, defeats Shang Tsung, and loses to Shang Tsung in the final battle. That's 4-4. Green Lantern loses to Sonya, defeats Lex Luthor, defeats Jax, defeats Sonya, loses to Shang Tsung, and loses to Liu Kang in the final battle. That's 3-3. Darkseid loses to Superman in a cutscene, and Shao Kahn knocks Quan Chi down, so I'm tempted to give him a point, but he actually has nothing that can be considered a fight. But we're not going to include those two in the tally because they don't have any fights in the story mode despite being playable. Dark Khan maybe fights Katana off screen to infect her so strongly with the Combat Rage. He loses to Raiden and Superman together. That's 1-1 or 0-1. Now we look over the data and find our ultimate conclusions. The fighter with the most fights is Scorpion with 10. The fighters with the least fights are Baraka and potentially Katana with 3 each. The most overdone matchup is Jax vs Lex Luthor, which takes place 3 times, Jax winning once and Lex winning twice. The fighters with the most wins are Batman, The Flash, Lex Luthor, Liu Kang, Shang Tsung and Sub-Zero with 5 each. The fighters with the least wins are Baraka, Catwoman, Deathstroke, Kano, Kitana and potentially Dark Khan, all with 0. The strongest ratio is shared by The Flash and Lex Luthor with 5-3. The most balanced ratios are Sonya and Captain Marvel with 4-4 and Green Lantern with 3-3. The fighter with the most losses is, shockingly, Scorpion with 6. The fighters with the least losses are Baraka, The Flash, Green Lantern, Jax, the Joker, Lex Luthor, Liu Kang, Raiden, Superman and Wonder Woman with 3 each. Kitana has 3 or 4. The weakest ratios are Catwoman, Deathstroke and Kano with 0-4. I'm going to give the award to Selina though because one of her fights was so insignificant that it took place entirely off screen. So our final conclusion is that Lex Luthor and The Flash are the winners of MK vs DC Universe, emerging tied for most wins but with less losses than their contemporaries. And Lex's partner and Flash's punching bag for most of the story, Catwoman, comes away as the biggest loser due to having no wins and losing without even a gameplay fight on 2 separate occasions. And that's all for MK vs DC Universe. Next time we move on to NetherRealm's big debut, Mortal Kombat. No, that's Mortal Kombat 1.
That's it.
If you liked this video, why not subscribe and support me on Patreon like these fine people here? If not, then make sure to share it with your enemies so they can suffer along with you. Today's recommended video is Mortal Kombat vs DC Universe Sucks by Sonic Heart XD, because no one else talks about this game.